approved, the two processes run in parallel, so that when the approval to fly the aircraft without an airworthiness certificate that's done through the Section 333 exemption process is complete.
Now, you say that approval is based on the design of the aircraft and its capabilities, is that right?
Yes, and the operations. And then they come in and say, okay, we want to operate it in this particular area.
Right.
And our air traffic organization assesses whether or not it's safe for them to operate. So they're looking for, conflicts with manned airplanes.
Okay, so this is both FAA in both cases. One is the safety of the equipment itself, and then the safety of the actual instance that they want to use it, this specific situation. And are we having any trouble, Mr. Gwynn, with the actual approval of the system itself, meaning your crafts that you could bring before for them for approval? Am I understanding that, do you think that should be streamlined or?
Yes, sir. So when one of our customers wants to use, say, a system for, looking at photomosaics of a farm so that they can see where the water's going and when to pick the grapes, they need to take that system and get a Section 333 exemption, which is where the FAA determines, is this aircraft...
Well, once you've gotten that from this, to do that...
Well, first you have to get that.
That's
and
what I
so
mean.
far, of all the companies...
But after that, you don't have to get it again, right? Is that correct?
For the Section 333. So far, 14 have been granted.
Out of how many?
Is that correct, 14?
Out of how many requests?
Out of everyone in the country that wants to fly their drones.
Oh, is that right? 14?
Right, but the process is being improved, and they're going to be coming out a little more frequently.
So it's difficult first to get it, 14 out of however many thousand.
All right.
And then once you have a Section 333, you have to get the certificate of authorization to fly in a specific area,
So
which is...
what we have here is technology, and the technological capabilities are far surpassed the ability of making decisions about standards and rulemaking, general rulemaking, and that's what we have to catch up with. This isn't the first time that's happened in history, I'm sure, and I hope that, can you tell me, can anyone here tell me which is more dangerous, a small privately owned airplane flying from here to there or a drone flying from here to there? Anybody want to?
Well, I've had several friends that have been in helicopter crashes, actually specifically going out the side of the door, taking pictures of power lines. So, I can't speak to the factual evidence here, but in my estimation, having a 2 or 3 pound drone flying over a national grid power line taking photos, if it were to fail in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't have to worry about auto-rotating down to the ground when they're already flying outside the chart. So all it does is bounce off the power line, fall to the ground, you take another one out of the truck and keep inspecting. So my guess is that would be much more safe and would allow us to start saving lives today.
We've actually done analysis on this, and it really depends on the size of the drone. So for a small drone, the risk to people on the ground and to people in the air is much lower.
Has there ever been anybody hurt from a crashing drone, on the ground?
I mean, there's been, ouch, you hit me in the head with that drone, but,
All right. Let me ask you about how the FAA is planning to do this. Is this testing areas, test sites that have been established and to help you try to determine whether or not these pieces of equipment should be approved. Could somebody tell me what they do at those test sites?
Well, the primary intention for the test sites is to provide an opportunity for manufacturers to do their developmental tests and evaluation in support of moving forward toward approval.
And that's what we had spent $11 million on that, providing that to you last year, and now that budget's been increased. Is that right?
No, sir. There hasn't been any appropriation to the FAA to directly support those test sites.
Okay.
We funded it out of our existing appropriation.
Is it possible that when we have these companies that are seeking profit, which is a good thing, and think they have technology, which is a good technology, do you think that in order to facilitate and to move the process along, that maybe it would be good to have the companies reimburse the government for the specific test, or be able to certify certain people to conduct those tests other than government employees?
I believe that's the actual intent of the test sites. The cost for running the test sites is currently being borne by the states who sponsored them, and they're getting compensation from the companies who come to them for testing, or the government. In a couple of cases, there have been some government testing done there. The FAA doesn't fund the test site operating costs.
Okay.
They're independently
Well, we've
funded.
only had 14 of these things approved, so I can't imagine we've had much revenue so far, but I would hope that,
So there's a small number of companies covering those costs, which is why it's prohibitively expensive to go to those sites to test
Well-
versus going to Canada or Mexico, our neighbors.
all right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Just a couple statements, maybe a quick question. You know, the UAS systems have helped quite a bit. I know that these aren't something new. They've been around for 50 or 60 years. I can remember the HIMAT program, which helped us get into the fourth and fifth generation fighters that we have today. And also, I appreciate what they do to help pilots have a safer flight. The GCAS system that we are working on right now with the United States Air Force and the Navy, we put that on a UAS system because flying an airplane into the ground was not what a pilot wanted to do. So you put that on a UAS, and hopefully the software worked, which it did, and the plane didn't crash, and then you might get a test pilot to do that. But my questions are more in line with privacy and how Congress is going to move forward in the next 20 years, especially when it comes to law enforcement. Law enforcement has been part of the UAS discussion over the last 10 years especially. If you have a helicopter that is chasing a bad guy and he flurs that area down there, we have decided that that's okay. But if you used a UAS, we have decided that that's probably not okay. And so the discussion is going to go, and I can already see, Mr. Wynn, you probably want to answer this, is how do we go about that? How is the lawmaking, how is the rulemaking going to be when we talk about UASs in the law enforcement arena?
Well, I think that's a great question. Thank you. And I think for law enforcement, it's probably the easiest to solve because you just simply say these are the rules for whether or not you can engage with a UAS and whether or not that evidence can be, admitted into a hearing. Because obviously the point of law enforcement is to stop crime, and the only way to stop crime is to be able to convict, and the only way to be able to convict is to use admissible evidence, right? So I think that one's pretty simple to say this is what's allowed, this is not what's not allowed. You have notice of proposed rulemaking, people vote on it and decide. I think the stickier point is the guy that's not being regulated, the hobbyist who's using these systems to peek into somebody's window, right? And there's a lot of people that have those concerns, and they're valid concerns. But I would hearken this back to when phone manufacturers started putting cameras in cell phones. People were very concerned about this. Samsung, as a matter of fact, it was a rule that you could not have a camera-equipped phone on the campus of Samsung. Right now, obviously, every single employee has a camera in their pocket. And so I think that people realize with this new technology that there's probably not tens of thousands of would-be criminals just waiting for this perfect technology to be able to spy on each other. And I think it's just a matter of education. What can you get at the Apple store? Wireless baby monitors and drop cams and things like that could easily be set up silently and very small and not noticeable in somebody's house versus a loud, blinky, lit up drone flying out the window. The reason, so I think it's just a matter of education and a matter of saying, let's leverage existing anti-invasion of privacy laws and make sure that those laws are applied to whatever technology is being used to invade somebody's privacy. And there should be consequences.
And I guess what I would follow up on is that we already have an existing technology that does this, that chases bad guys from the air. So I guess, Mr. Williams, you can answer this. Would the FAA decide that they would follow the same exact rules as maybe an air unit does in today's law enforcement? Would they follow the same rules, or would they be able to do different things? Because, a helicopter can't fly like a UAS can. A helicopter can't do the things that a small UAS can do. So that's, I think, will be a question for Congress is, are we going to lax those rules to make it more available for the troops on the ground, the cops on the ground, to use it in a different manner?
Well, one of the initiatives we took back in 2012 was to set up a special process called for in our reauthorization of 2012 for law enforcement. And we have been working directly with individual law enforcement agencies around the country. There's some that have had some spectacular success with their aircraft, and it is a priority for my office to continue to support law enforcement use of unmanned aircraft and find ways to improve their operations. And I have 2 individuals who do that as their full-time jobs. So we very much support finding ways for law enforcement to use unmanned aircraft safely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Congressman, I just wanted to point out that AUVSI, in an earlier effort, we did work with the International Association of Chiefs of Police to develop guidelines. I'd be happy to submit those for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know where to start. Are the permits issued from the FAA? There's been, let me understand this. I came in late. So there's been 14 permits approved. Is that right?
For small civil aircraft operators, yes. We have 2 certificated aircraft that are operating commercially in Alaska, and there are a tremendous number of over 700 public aircraft operators, in other words, government operators that we've approved.
Are they based on size, Mr. Williams? Category 1 might be that you could fly up to something that's 200 pounds, 500 pounds, or is there a weight limit?
Well, the FAA in general takes a risk-based approach to all our approvals, and so the reason there are different levels of approval is there's different levels of risk. So for these very small ones that we're now approving through an exemption process, we're essentially, because of their size, weight, and operating environments, basically waiving most of the manned aircraft rules so they don't have to comply.
So what is a small weight?
Under 55 pounds was legislated in our 2012 reauthorization, was defined as small in that legislation.
Are there approved operators that get above 55 pounds?
Yes, sir. On the public aircraft operation side, they go up to the Global Hawk aircraft that both NASA and DoD fly is approximately the same size as 727.
Are they able to cross into Mexico and Canada without violating airspace issues?
I believe the DoD flies around the world with their unmanned aircraft, and they're following the ICAO rules for manned aircraft the same way as they do for.
What about private companies if they cross from the United States into Canada?
We currently don't have any approved private companies that are operating across the borders, and there is a committee, or what they call a panel, has been formed at ICAO to develop the international standards and recommended practices for unmanned aircraft crossing between countries. So that regulatory framework internationally is being developed.
So when a company gets approval, it's permitted or licensed. What do you call it?
Well, we call the pilots get it certificated, I guess would be the best term.
Certificated, okay. Does that process of certification get reviewed after 1 year, 2 years?
From a standpoint of if the aircraft is approved through a type certificate, then it's indefinite. There's no restriction on that.
So-
For the processes that we're doing through the exemptions, those are good for 2 years.
Okay, so if a UAV, if one of these units falls out of the sky and hits a car on the ground, liability insurance, do people market insurance for these things?
Yes, sir. There is insurance available through the multiple different insurance companies.
Okay. The little cameras on it, I know, Mr. Gwynn, you talked about the high-definition camera. Are they able to transmit video back on the ground? Is that standard, pretty much standard?
Yes, absolutely. Even what Baptiste was flying today from Parrot transmits high-def video back to your tablet.
Is it captured, for lack of a better term, in a little black box? Does it record its own?
There's a myriad of ways to do it. So we can actually record on the ground at the same time that we're recording a much higher bitrate stream on the camera in the air. So for later review, if you need to zoom into an image and check a power line or something like that.
But you said it had a computer on it. Does it have the capability of storing that right on board?
Absolutely. Yeah, most of the cameras that are on board have their own memory card slots, and you're storing it right on the memory card.
It has, and I know this is getting way out there, but are people able, I mean, you think about people hacking into different things. Are they going to be able to hack into these and commandeer these?
It's a good question. I think that, probably for Dr. Lobner, a much better question.
I will just add that cyber physical security is one of the key issues that we identify in our report. It is a concern, and it needs to be addressed from the outset.
How many drone manufacturers are there? 10, 20?
At least hundreds.
Hundreds. How
Yes.
many in the USA?
Much less than anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, 3D Robotics, our company, is the largest in the
Okay,
U.S.
one final question. You see planes fly over with a number on the bottom of it. You can identify the number. Are the drones numbered, identified?
They're not today, but that's one of the considerations, especially for the heavier systems, to have a tail number.
Okay, and let me go one more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So Google has a car that they can drive, they say, wherever without, can you program one of these drones to go somewhere and back and basically never touch it?
Absolutely, yes. Just right from your smartphone if you need to.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for showing up today and bringing that great testimony. I had the opportunity to read the written testimony. This is one of those days where another committee meeting with votes required conflicted with the early part of the schedule, so some of us didn't get to see the demonstration of your vehicle. And if the chairman would indulge us, I'd be interested, and I think some of the others would be interested in seeing it.
Okay, do we still have the vehicle and the pilot? Okay.
Yeah, we can get it back up in the air in just about 1 minute.
All right, that'll work.
All right, let's have another quick, brief demonstration that perhaps can use more airspace this time, too. Yeah,
Baptiste?
and we'll define haircuts within 2 feet of someone's head, so if you can stay above that, that'll be...
He's going to show you leaf blower mode with your papers on your desk.
Uh-oh. We didn't give you much advance notice here, but...
It'll take him about 30 seconds or 45 seconds to connect to the Wi-Fi network before he can take off.
Okay.
Did you have any quick questions in the meantime?
Silence is golden in this committee, too.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Another fun fact is that he'll be piloting this drone from his iPhone, as well as seeing a live HD feed right on his phone that's being digitally stabilized. So pretty cool for $500.
We'll all have one by the next time you come back
Yeah.
and testify here.
Well,
My kids got them for Christmas.
whoops.
And that's your worst case scenario. Oh my gosh.
You know,
Drone
maybe-
crash. Drone crash.
Maybe we won't fly over people. We'll fly.
Yeah, well, as he's flying over, you just do this. Just in case.
Yeah.
A fringe case is when you're asked to fly a drone in 60 seconds in front of Congress.
Yeah.
This is the kind of data we need to be collecting out in the real world.
We need to make allowances for this.
Doesn't count against his
Yeah. Tell you what, just to take the pressure off of you, maybe we ought to. Okay.
All right, here we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Can you head towards Mr. Posey and just keep it right out of. There we go. There we go.
Leaf blower mode, here we go. Baptiste, can I push it around a little bit to show its stability? Or do you want to?
Turns off. I don't know.
Yep, in a very French and stylish way. Thank you.
That's right. Thanks again for that. Mr. Posey, anything else? Or-
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Holgren, is recognized.
Well, thank you all for being here. This is important and interesting, and really do appreciate the work that you're doing, and we do want to be helpful and make sure that we do this well. With development and usage, I know of UAS expanding certainly is crucial that we understand the research our government is doing, especially the research that will affect the rulemaking process FAA is currently undergoing. From a competitive standpoint, it's also crucial that we do this right so that we're not encouraging businesses to move elsewhere or denying access to researchers for the best, most cost-effective tools that they need to do their work. To be frank, sometimes I find the FAA's process to be a little bit confusing, and I agree certainly with the need for public safety. That should always be our top goal, but right now, my fear is in the name of safety, I'm afraid we are stifling innovation and research opportunities by keeping pretty harmless UASs out of the sky. At the same time, on an unrelated topic, but one that's important to me, I've been trying to get answers from the FAA about their air traffic controller hiring practices, which were recently changed, and I believe could jeopardize the safety of airline passengers across the country. We're going to continue to try and get answers there from the FAA. But getting to questions, Mr. Williams, in early December 2014, the Association of American Universities and Association of Public Land-Grant Universities wrote a letter to FAA stating, and I quote, "There is no timely workable mechanism for both public and private universities to secure FAA approval to conduct important research utilizing small unmanned aerial systems or SUAS technology." Wondered, has FAA considered issuing a rule to make it easier for universities to research SUASs, such as allowing universities to research SUASs on their own property below 400 feet?
Well, we believe that our small rule will address the needs of the universities. We also believe that, and I've had discussions with several universities about this, that they can move forward using our Section 333 process to conduct their training, research, et cetera. And I've had discussions with several universities about the possibility of doing that, and I think they're interested.
Okay. So in the meantime, there is some opportunities there, but also you expect that the rule would give them this ability to do some of the research that they're looking to do. Mr. Williams, roughly how much interest is there in the FAA test sites in terms of calls, meetings, and website visits? How many organizations have actually used the test sites?
I don't have that data with me, sir. We can certainly get back to you with
Could you?
that.
That'd be great. If you can maybe get that back to us or to the committee, that would be terrific. Mr. Wynn and Mr. Gwynn, how would you organize the FAA UAS test sites to best accommodate industry's R&D needs?
Sir, we want to get this word out. I think it's early days for the test sites, so we've got to make the more accessible. We've discussed earlier the need for greater transparency, getting the costs down, et cetera. I think there's also a need to focus the research on the specific areas that we've been all agreeing needs to be advanced. So I think those are the primary elements that we'd be looking at.
Do you have anything to add?
I would take the 6 FAA test sites that exist in remote locations and expand that to test sites that might be on your company's private property that have, strict regulations around what you're allowed to do, geo-fenced. The drones with a geo-fence will not cross that barrier. They have that level of intelligence today. So sub 400 feet, don't cross the geo-fence, remain line of sight, and now that test site can be on your own company's property.
Have you heard if they're open to that, looking into that?
Are you guys open to that?
Mr. Williams?
I believe that we have the experimental process could accommodate that type of operation. We have experimental airworthiness certificates that we issue for development, research, et cetera, that have been taken advantage of by other companies to do exactly that. So that process does remain available to anyone who chooses to use it.
And I hear that a lot, and that's the same, is that the same airworthiness certificate that there's been 14 total granted so far in the country of all the people that want to fly drones?
No, we've issued quite a few more experimental certificates.
So the Section 333, that's what is required for a private drone operator to be able to operate and
Yeah,
do testing?
that's for commercial use. Or, I mean, the experimental process is for the developmental use.
Okay, so I guess I'm talking about more for private sector versus government. Is that?
Let me ask you this real quick because I'm running out of time. But on that, how do you see other countries' openness to doing this versus the United States, your members? Have you seen similar openness here as in other countries, or do you see greater challenge?
Well, there's a huge disparity, and I think in other countries they just use a simple, proportional risk-based system to say if the drone is very lightweight and being flown low altitude, line of sight, there's a lot less regulation than a heavy drone being flown out of line of sight at higher altitudes. So
to me, it makes common sense. Yeah,
it's pretty logical.
So hopefully we can see what other countries have been doing safely, and we can do the same thing here. Thank you, Chairman, for your indulgence. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Holmgren. And the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was called away to another meeting, so I missed a lot of this, and thank you for the demonstration. I might ask for one of those for Christmas myself. Couple of things. I don't know if this has been asked, but has anyone done an estimate of the economic impact in the context of what it would be worth to the U.S. economy for if we had the design and engineering done here in the United States, if we do the construction here, manufacturer, I should say, the manufacturer of, well, if you're doing UASs as big, did you say as large as a 727? Is that what you said? So you would be doing design, engineering, and construction here. Has anyone looked at what the economic impact of that might be?
Yes, sir. The numbers that my organization had put together in 2013 suggest that after we have access to the National Airspace System, the economic impact amounts to about $82 billion and 100,000 jobs, 100,000 plus jobs. Those numbers were put together in 2013. We think they probably, we're going to update those numbers. We think they probably understate the opportunity.
Now that is just the design, engineering, construction. That's my question.
And ancillary.
And that would be the commercial use?
No, that does not include commercial use.
Okay.
Profitability for other business models.
All right. Are we losing any technological advantage by the delays in approval for testing? In other words, if this is if this goes offshore?
For the design and test, in those numbers, I think, yes, sir. I think that's an important distinction. The markets that the end user community, such as the insurance industry, the agricultural community, et cetera, they'll still want to utilize the technology. The question is whether or not they'll be using American-built technology.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may add to that, during the course of our study, we heard presentations from many in the industry. Many of them told us that they could not conduct the kind of research and development that they needed to do in the U.S. and that they were taking their operations offshore.